Hello, this is Jeanette Horn. Welcome to the Key Performance Ideas webinar on Advanced Financial Master Data Management and Oracle Hyperion Data Relationship Management, MDM and DRM. Our presenter today is Daniel Poon. Daniel has spent 15 years in a broad range of finance roles that span across accounting, financial planning and analysis, and project management disciplines in some of the biggest global companies. He is extremely passionate in engineering and implementing a range of innovative business intelligence solutions. An active speaker at Oracle user groups nationally and key blogger for the Key Performance Ideas blog on enterprise performance management, Daniel recently spearheaded a company-wide data warehouse initiative that included the development of a data governance framework and how master data is managed using Oracle DRM. Daniel is also a certified Oracle Hyperion Planning and S-Base consultant. Thank you so much for joining us today, Daniel. Take it away.
Thanks, Jeanette. Thanks for inviting me. Today we're going to be talking about how to deal with advanced master data management on Oracle DRM. As you may know, master data management is very important to organization because of the vast amount of data that they're dealing with. I'd say 10 years ago, we really don't have this issue, but over time, we have a situation where we have more data than we can handle, and therefore, to manage master data becomes an important topic. And Oracle DRM has gained a lot of popularity in recent years, as you may know. And what's happening is that what's important to know that is that you can't just implement a tool without first think about the process that needs to be put in place. What I mean is master data management, and that it needs to be put in place. And what's important is that it has to be done right. So today we're going to be talking about how to implement it properly, how to deal with data governance, and then we're going to have that implemented and supported by Oracle DRM. So by the end of this presentation, you'll learn about all the essential ingredients as to how to actually implement it in your place. We will be going through real-life example, and you can then use it in your own environment.
So let's get into the presentation. First up, why is master data management important? If you look back at about 10 years, I think most of us would agree that we don't have a lot of data that we have today. And today, obviously, we have no lack of data, and we need to manage it. And in the BI world, you've also hear a buzzwords called, things like one single version of truth. Is that really? So let's look at master data management. If I'm a CFO, which revenue is really the truth? In a very typical mid-sized company, the CFO is likely to have a different number of different groups, the headquarters, a business unit, or the region. And what he's likely to see is that HQ will report a different number than the business unit, than the region. And be it as it may that they come from different systems, they are also reported by different people. Now, why are they different? So going back to the question, is there one version of truth? Well, maybe there are cases for multiple versions, and we look at why things are different. So for example, they may be from various sources. We understand that booking systems versus billing system, they're quite different systems because of timing. Bookings usually come first before billing. So if you're reporting off the two systems, you're obviously going to have different numbers. Different business rules. How people like to roll things up. Because the reports are done by different people, they're likely to have their own rules apply based on what they believe to be the truth. There may be different assumptions. We decide to include certain things or exclude certain things, and that's quite common. timing of reporting. Some people does it weekly, some people does it monthly. Different accuracy rounding. So as you can see, there are a variety of reasons why there's a case for different versions of truth and why master data management could be important. Let's look at, if you haven't grasped what is master data, typically we deal with a lot more on a day-to-day basis with transaction data. That's the things that, for example, the general ledger actuals. And then there's also analytical data, the end product, the reports, the metrics that we tend to measure. What's often forgotten about is the master data that sits behind it. So, for example, you may have a business entity hierarchy, right, and that rolls up your office locations to your various countries before it's rolling up to the region and headquarters. That itself is a business entity hierarchy, and it exists in many, many different places. And this relationship of roll-up is what we call master data, because it describes the data that's underneath. It describes the transactional data or the analytical data. So if you haven't thought about that already, how things are defined on the business rules, how things are being rolled up will obviously affect how you end up reporting. So back to our problem, having different numbers, one of the very common case is that you have different people doing different reports based on different roll-ups and rules. Now, what's the problem here? I mean, we have different systems having different master data. Well, what you're likely to see is that over time, organizations build different systems for the individual needs. The architect obviously is trying to solve a particular problem. And so the master data structure is built for a purpose. And over time, you'll see there, not just one, but several, and many of these systems that are actually propping up. And they all have their own process in maintaining the structure. So master data is actually stored and managed in multiple places. And therefore, it needs to be managed. And what you also see is that the change process are often manual. So there may be a person maintaining the GL hierarchy. There may be another person maintaining it in S-Base planning, even in Excel spreadsheets. So, that's where all the plus and minuses, all the roll-ups, all the rules are being applied, exclusions, inclusion, all that kind of good stuff. And as a result, what you'll find is there's discrepancies because there's no clear understanding of what all the other business constituents are doing. And if we trace, for example, department expenses, that it normally gets created in, for example, Oracle GL for the purpose of capturing expenses. So it's first created there, but at the beginning there may not be transactions. And so the other systems may not have it. And over time, transaction gets posted, and you'll see it flow across all the other related systems such as S-Base planning and HFM, data warehouses, and whatnot. And eventually, you also see them in the reports. Now, some of the things that may happen is you could also have timing issues that organization experience because while you've updated one, you may not have updated all the others. Another thing that may happen is that there could be human errors or faults, and so they may be added in the wrong places, causing reporting and reconciliation issues down the road. So as a result, one of the master data management problem that we need to address is this growing pain where, you could have multiple systems not syncing with each other. Their master data definitions, the timing, and all of those need to be synced in order for the reports to work. So we can conceptualize a model here And I say conceptualize it because this is not the full diagram, and we're going to travel down the journey through this 20 minutes presentation to see how this diagram will evolve to a solution that will address the problem that we've illustrated earlier. So wouldn't it be great, from what we've learned, is having all the master data maintained in one place, and then have it propagate downstream to all the important elements, all the systems that we want to report on. And as a result, people who get reports from these systems should ideally be getting things based on the same rules and structure. So there are a number of benefits for that. One obvious benefit is that the downstream systems will be synced. The problem that we've illustrated of syncing different systems, so those could be solved, and there's productivity gains there. And not to mention, you have less people trying to manage all of this master data, saving the cost. Another benefit is that there's now one place to host all the master data and structure, and one place for people to see it and understand it. So today, let's take an example. If you want to know how a data warehouse report is generated, you likely have to call a data warehouse SQL developer, and then he or she will be able to give you the logic for that report, if you can read his code. With a tool that can perhaps expose you to the logic, you can better understand those reports and actually saving time reconciling differences. At the end of the chain, you also have users getting reports using the same rules. This obviously reduces the chance of reporting different numbers because there are different rules being applied. And, as we go, I want to make a point that the one version of truth is not what we're trying to advocate here, but what we're trying to do is get away from having the madness of having multiple definitions in many, many different systems down to a manageable few, perhaps two or three or four, so that people can comprehend those differences. One of the clients we worked on, as we were doing our discovery phase, is that we found, over 20 definitions of product revenue. And I think that's pretty typical as a company grow, so you can imagine how people, if they talk about product revenue, which one are they really talking about? Because inevitably, they're actually talking in different languages. So now, the reason why I said this isn't a complete diagram, there are other elements to consider. So we kind of touch on a tool that actually propagates the downstream so that we can do report. But we also have an element on the upstream that we need to consider. So what I want to talk to you about is the element of data governance. Now, data governance is actually important because even though if we put a tool in place that does the syncing that we've illustrated as part of the problem, if we don't apply rules to the master data, you could still end up having a lot of issues. One example I can recall is there is a client that we worked on that has a department code segment that's 4-digit long. And over time, they have almost 8,000 department codes. So needless to say, they have an issue with running out of numbers because you have 4-digit and you're trying to fit only up to 9,000 codes and you've already got 8,000. And not to mention they have a problem with ranges. You want to put departments in specific ranges and they're running out. And then not to mention, there's with more codes requires more processing for reports, for all sorts of things. So we need a way to manage, things like departments, products, customers, entities, locations, all these kind of different things So what we're advocating is a system of people and processes, which we call data governance. Data governance is, as we see here, is a system of decision-making rights and accountabilities for information-related processes. What it does is it describes the actions of what information, when, and under what circumstances and methods to apply when we're making changes. So what we're trying to do is have a way to proactively create and align on the rules. We want to resolve issues. We want to protect the different constituents. So while you decided, hey, this is a good idea that we manage all the master data in one place for all the different systems, don't forget there are different people involved here, and they all have a vested interest, and they want to do certain things. Quite often, we see conflicts, and we need to be able to resolve those. Now, let me drill into a little bit more on data governance. So here's a typical framework of data governance. First, we need to have a guiding principle, like a mission statement. We need to have the right people involved to make the decisions. So there's a decision-making bodies that we need to form, to put together. We need to set a framework on how the decision rights actually apply. So quite often we see requests coming in. Somebody says, I want to add 5 to 10 departments because our VP needs it. And often that the IT and the finance team don't really understand what these requests are actually trying to do, and in turn could create more problems. So if you say, okay, I want to create 10 departments and a certain needs it, how are you going to say no, even if you know they may be creating some other potential problems? So what data governance does is that it will actually provide a forum for you to have that discussion take place without fearing organizational politics. And not to mention, we need governance mechanisms, tools that can help us. So for example, Oracle DRM to manage the master data. We need a way to figure out the exception process. We may need a workflow tool to manage all the requests and approval. We may need other IT-related tools to put in place. So all of this will help us to enforce, whatever that the policies may be. Now, this may all look a little bit conceptual. I say, Daniel, how to actually implement this? So let me give you an example, and we will use the example on departments. It's a simple use case, but I would argue it's one that's used most often. That's because department is one of the most requested items for master data, besides things like products or customers. So if we were to manage departments, how would we do that? First thing is we set a decision-making body. We could have a data governance council that will determine that a finance person in the corporate finance department will handle, the request from a governance perspective. We need a guiding principles, so to protect and to serve. Sounds a little bit like the police, doesn't it? But it really is. We need to actually set that out so that people know that their rights are being protected and that they're there to help. We need to set the decision rights. So here is really the importance of putting the policies and procedures in place. One thing I would use in some places is that we could set a rule to say a department should only be created with a minimum of 500K transactions or at least 10 headcounts. So anyone who comes along and say, I need a new department, you will tell them, well, here's our rules. And here's our governance rules that actually set out. Now, if someone comes up and say, I don't have 10 heads, then you have a legitimate reason for that department not to be created. The same thing with a transaction. And that makes it really transparent. It's objective. And so you can actually have a way of saying, why certain things should be created because you've set out those rules. And then to assist this data steward to manage the department well, we put tools in place. So first of all, we have a workflow tool to actually allow the request to come in so that the user knows exactly what to put in order to set up a department, and then an approval process so that you know exactly who gets to approve the request. And then at the end of that, what you hope is that then it actually flows into an Oracle DRM so that the master data can be maintained in that one place. And using DRM allows you to do SOX reporting and tracking. And then all your downstream system, ERPs, will hopefully be synced and sourced. And then your data steward can, over time, review on, whether the rules on departments should change over time. And one thing that's very important is on the right-hand side is the exception process. So again, going back to the example, if certain person disagree on, your rule that it should have at least 10 heads and 500K because of some legitimate reason, they can bring that up, and they can bring that up to the council, the Data Governance Council, and talk about exceptions, why some things should be done differently. So now you've got a complete ecosystem of managing that master data to ensure that there's no redundancy, that there's no issues with ongoing support, that you're not creating a bunch of master data and that no one else is going to use. And I kid you not, we've seen a lot of cases where you go to the ERP and you pick certain things, a list of departments, and 20% of them have been created, but with absolutely no transaction for the last year and a half. So that's actually happened quite often, and that's really because that there is no governance in place in some of these. IT or finance simply taking the request and actually process them as they come in, as opposed to challenging them and making sure that the right thing is being done there. Okay. Now, so after all is said and done, what else is there? Obviously, there's still stuff to do. I would argue that you need to make sure that that this department data governance person also talks with the overall data governance council so that everything is all synced up. You need to make sure that there's metrics. So, if based on the rules, no one can create any departments from that point onwards, that's not a good thing. If based on the rules, we're creating 1,000 departments a month, that's also a bad thing. So you can actually have some fairly simple metrics to actually measure how things are going. And obviously, you need to review the decision-making authority from time to time. You need to engage with stakeholders and provide some communication and roadmaps. So these are all important stuff as part of the making sure that data governance will work for you. So following from an early diagram, we now have a little bit more complete of a best practice solution. First of all, we have a data governance framework that handles the request, the things that come in for people that they want to do with master data, and we know exactly how to deal with them. We also have the tools in place that includes DRM, that includes some workflow tool, that includes all the rest of the ecosystem, so that people knows exactly what to do. And then once we have that in place, we have Oracle DRM managing the master data. We also talk about having a workflow tool to handle requests. And at the end of the day, we have all the downstream system being synced up properly. And then we have people on the right-hand side getting reports, presumably from a much better system of managing master data. And therefore, my numbers is expected to be explainable, that people can comprehend to, that people can understand what the rules, what the business rules that are being applied. So we're not here to talk about Oracle DRM, so we're not doing a demo here. But those of you, if you're interested, you can contact a company and we can schedule one for you. But what we do want to talk about in DRM is how DRM comes into play with the whole master data management solution. So Oracle DRM, first of all, helps you to put all the business rules and definitions in one place, and it exposes it so that people can actually see it. People can log in and look at it, and therefore they can speak the same language. It enables hierarchy management, so you can pretty much drill down on the structure and know exactly what your information path. So people a lot of times is new to the company, joined from some other place, and have no way of understanding how the organization works and how the reports work. And so there's a place that they can go to, even for auditors, right? We need to look at how, standard reports are implemented. If you're implementing standard reports, this would be a good thing so that you can see how things can tie to each other and whether there are differences, and if they are, how that's being compared. And then, when you talk about performance management, this is a lot easier to deal with than having to, a couple of different people bringing in their reports and compare line by line, because you have a common structure. I'll tell you a little bit about how DRM is different to the other tools. Some people may have heard that, we have EPMA or we have SBase to manage hierarchies and rules. And DRM is a little bit better in a number of respects. First of all, you can keep versions. So, in all the other tools, once you've made changes to a hierarchy, it's done, and that's your latest version. So you can never go back. You can also do comparisons. So if I have, two hierarchies for certain reporting needs, maybe for organization, maybe for region, I can actually make a comparison very quickly and actually be able to tell, hey, this one is different to the other one because of five members that are here and not there. Now, that's a lot easier to do than comparing reports again. We can put in validation and verification so that when we actually update the downstream systems, we actually put in the right prefix and suffix, and not having things like, for example, SBase requires the name and the description to be unique, and those are the things that can actually happen before we actually upload to the downstream system, because you don't want that problem to occur, as we go down. SOX compliance. A lot of people, before using DRM have been used to keeping email. So if I request a department, I would actually keep email all the way from cradle to grave, all the approvals. So what happens is when a SOX audit comes along, they either need to pick up the emails, or they may even have problems because an individual has left the company, and you have an extra task of keeping all the emails archived, and sometimes that may not even be possible. So having Oracle DRM allows you to see the whole life cycle of any of your master data, so you know exactly who created them. And then also publishing to the web. So, anyone who wants to know anything about the master data can go to a browser, log in, and actually see it without having to consult with any other individual. User benefits, you don't no longer need to reconcile reports, which we think is labor-intensive, high cost, and error-prone anyway. There's certain special rules, and you can actually have that all inside DRM so that it can be managed in one place. You can talk to multiple ERP, BI, or GL system. So you can just, have an Oracle GL account, and then you can expect that to go into SBase, planning, HFM, all the rest of it. And so even though they have different properties, different prefix, suffix, all the other good stuff, Oracle DRM can handle that. And last but not least, changes based on merger acquisition. So whenever it comes to those scenarios, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work because if you have 5 or 6 different systems, you want to make those changes, adding a new company, adding all the departments into your structure, it's very complex. And again, wouldn't it be great if you have one tool that actually allows you to do that? For the technical folks, for example, IT, it helps you to eliminate the need for manual entry. So instead of somebody typing in all the master data, you can just basically do that at the beginning of request and expect to flow through, so reducing the time and also error. You can allow things to be validated, so that goes in correct the first time. You can allow, you can have standardization and consolidation, so, back to the point of not having to maintain master data across multiple systems. And we've said it before, SOX compliance allows us to, improve our compliance ability, and then you don't need to keep manual records of all your changes. So, that completes the best practice solution, but there is actually a bit more that we haven't actually talked about, and we've circled it here called a workflow. So let's not forget about the workflow, because we do need it to handle all our request management. So what we are talking to you about is also a tool that Key Performance Ideas is launching as part of our offerings for DRM. So typically we go to various different clients, and they have decided to implement DRM. What they may also be interested in is a way for them to submit requests, so people can submit a request to change a department, to add a new department, or whatever. And they want to be able to have a workflow that actually works with that. In a typical IT model, you have a help desk system. Most people have a help desk system. But what's not always available in those systems is asking the right question. So, for example, we illustrate that we need a department, therefore we need to have 10 heads and 500K. You need somewhere in your help desk tickets that ask that question so that users will give you the right response, and therefore, the right process can, the right flow and the right approval all come into play. So what we've developed in KPI is what we call KPI Pulse, is that workflow system that allows all that we've explained, and also integration with Oracle DRM. So if you're implementing DRM, it allows update at the end of that. So in other words, you enter the change, and it gets updated, it gets approved, and then pushes into DRM. So you don't need someone else on the other end updating DRM manually, which again could cause the manual and the error and all that kind of stuff. So, what KPI Pulse take care of is the forms, from a requester's perspective, allows you to do multiple updates so that you don't do just one update per request, and then allows approvals to happen, and allows you to see what the changes inside a tool. Similar to Oracle DRM, it does also provide the workflow. So you can actually make approvals, you can deny certain requests, you can also add notes and ask more questions. So it saves you from having the back and forth, which I guess, again, in a typical scenario, is that you would be leveraging email to ask your users exactly what's needed. Some person says, I need a department, and then it'll be an email say, hey, does it have 10 heads and 500K? The other person emails back, oh, yes, oh, no, it doesn't. And then emails the approver with all those conversation in email and say, hey, please approve. So you know how that goes. Now you have a tool that actually allows you to put it all in one place, and at the end of that, flow directly into DRM. So what KPI Pulse does is actually becomes a supported software. Instead of custom-built, homegrown system that handles that, KPI has a supported software, just similar to your Oracle software. It's supported, and you can call a number of your problems. We think it's a best-in-class workflow engine. We know that it's user-friendly. It's easy for people to use, and allows you to add forms and be customizable, and have a bunch of other features that, for example, handles multiple requests in one submission as opposed to having multiple single requests, and also doing uploads in bulk via spreadsheets. So that's just some of the things that you should think about. And so we're not here to sell KPI Pulse. We're here to talk about master data management. So I want to go back to this diagram and actually recap to tell you that, okay, so going forward, in order to manage your master data properly for your organization, this is what we see. And it's actually a trend, not just in one or two places, but across the board in a lot of organizations, that you go from having a best practice data governance framework to having a tool that manages your master data, to have your workflow that manages the request, to have a downstream system capturing those requests, and then to your reporting. So basically, that's what we talked about, and that's what I'm here to present it. We are now open to questions.
If you want to ask a question, please go to your chat screen and send your question directly to the presenter, Daniel.
Okay. Let's see. I need to see the chat down. Okay, I got 2 questions here. First one, why do we need KPI Pulse? Isn't DRM a workflow tool also? So to answer that, DRM is a tool that allows you to manage your master data. It does have an extensive API that can talk to any workflow tool that's outside of DRM, but it does not have a workflow tool per se. So in a lot of places we see is a homegrown system or leverage the existing help desk that allows them to manage those requests. So I think that's why we see this as a additional capability, that we've been doing this for a while, that we see the same issue place to place. If you have a custom built tool, then you're likely to run into issues, especially when those key talents moved on and you don't know how to make changes. And a lot of it also are not customizable. So what end up being is you hard code all the forms, and if you ever make any change because of an organization change, that becomes a fairly expensive IT exercise. So that's why we want to make something that's a lot easier, and something that is needed and desirable if you're implementing Oracle DRM. Another question is, how does versioning work? In DRM, versioning works, I guess it works internally. It's basically has the ability for you to basically select a date and roll back at any time. So it's really quite cool. It's virtual. So I could have a version today, and then next month I'll have a financial close, and maybe I'll create another version. But meanwhile, I want the ability to see, what the hierarchy looked like 10 days ago, because I put in some changes and I wasn't sure exactly when that's done. DRM allows virtual versioning, so you basically select a certain date and a certain time, and then DRM will create a virtual version for you, so you can actually see it. And then after that, you can actually make comparisons. So then you can immediately see what the difference is between the existing version and the virtual version that you have selected. I have another question here. Do you have customers who've used DRM to incorporate chart of account changes to help facilitate EBAS upgrade? We have definitely used DRM as a chart of account change mechanism. That's actually one of the most asked about feature. So, for example, you have your chart of accounts in the GL, Oracle General Ledger, and you say, well, today someone has to go into the General Ledger and add a department, add an account, making an account from postable to not postable, roll up changes. That itself wasn't an easy task because I guess even Oracle itself, they don't want you to make any back-end changes directly to an Oracle GL, and that's usually a high-risk thing. But Oracle has come around, and they've actually allowed DRM to make direct changes to Oracle General Ledger. So today you can use DRM to manage your master data for account and expect those changes to be pushed to Oracle General Ledger. Now, in terms of using it to incorporate chart of account changes that facilitate an upgrade, what we see is you could do it, and this assumes that you've implemented DRM before you on 11.10.2. I think if your chart of accounts is significantly different, the mapping definitely can help. So, going from the old to the new, what you could do is have DRM saying the old code is A, the new code is B, and then expect that to be managed and pushed. But apart from that, I'm not sure if there's a lot of differences because when you upgrade, assuming it's only a version change, you can pretty much upgrade without having the need of DRM. So that's case by case. Okay.
Thank you, Daniel. I think we're pretty much out of time at this point. And thank you so much, Daniel, for the informative presentation on data governance, master data management, and data relationship management.